Wow, what a wild Week 15 in 2017. Hello, everyone. This is Footballin', and I am your host, Nicholas Vallado, brought to you on the Grandstand Sports Network. Check us all out there. We are all doing fantastic work. But what a week to remember. We saw two of the more ridiculous rulings to help facilitate victories to the more hated teams in the NFL, being the Patriots and the Dallas Cowboys. And in that Dallas game, we saw two ridiculous rulings in and of itself, with Derek Carr fumbling the ball into the back of the end zone and then the freaking index card. Of course, what is a catch comes back to roost once again. This is also a week where everyone was sweating over the fantasy playoffs. And if you started Keenan Cole, Jaden Mickens, Tavares King, Corey Grant, you were well off. But if you started studs, I put studs in quotes for this first guy, Jimmy Graham, and then other very talented players who busted this week, AJ Green, Antonio Brown, Russell Wilson, and Keenan Allen, you were more than likely beat. It was just a really ridiculous week in general, and we're going to dive into that in a second. But first, I want to go over what happened in the Meadowlands. Obviously, the Eagles are going through a lot of change because Carson Wentz tore his ACL in Los Angeles last week. Nick Foles steps in. All this talk around Philadelphia, can they make a playoff push and all of these things? Well, Nick Foles might have gave some of the Philadelphia Eagles fans a warm and fuzzy. Yes, it's against a hapless Giants team, but the Giants actually got up to play this game. Eagles squeak out a victory 34-29. The Giants had a chance to win it late in this game, but they could not get it done. But Nick Foles threw 4 touchdown passes to 4 different receivers, and he showed that he was competent in being the pocket quarterback that he is. He's just not the overly mobile guy that Carson Wentz was. But the Eagles defense, it's going to be a little bit concerning for the Eagles when Eli Manning comes out, throws for well over 400 yards. Yes, he almost threw the ball 60 times, but still, threw for almost over 400 yards, 3 touchdowns. Tavares King was burning them. Roger Lewis was getting open against Ronald Darby. Receivers with those kind of names. We saw a lot of big plays by the Giants offense with the long touchdown to Shepard, the long touchdown to King. King also got open for another touchdown. So from an Eagles perspective, yes, that's concerning, but you still were able to secure this win, secure a first-round bye. You're sitting there at 12-2 right now, feeling pretty about yourselves. And Nick Foles looked very competent in the process. But this game, I'm sitting there watching it, and I'm like, all right, I just hope the Giants don't get embarrassed at home. And they didn't. So that is something that gives me a good feeling about this team going forward in the future. I'm glad Eli looked good in this divisional matchup where these two teams do not like each other. The thing that was concerning was Eli came out after the game, and he said that he's not blaming Bobby Hart for the false start that led to the Giants getting pushed back to the 11-yard line, and that's where the game would end. Eli ended up throwing the ball to Evan Ingram, was a bit high, but that false start was pretty pivotal, pushing the Giants back and letting them not convert to win this football game. Eli said that he blames that Philadelphia crowd. He said that it was very loud, and this was a home game for the Giants, so that's concerning to see the Eagles fans have an impact, but what can you say? When you win 2 freaking games in a season, the fans are going to sell the tickets, they're not going to go. The Eagles fans traveled to this game right up the turnpike, not a far drive, and that kind of helped lead the Eagles to victory, if you want to make that argument for this game. Sterling Shepard showed up big in this game as well. The Giants did not run the football, something that they have not been able to do all year. And the Giants are going to be playing golf here soon, hoping to get this second pick locked up. Now we have to worry about the Colts, because the Colts suck. They need to possibly beat the Ravens, and I know that's a Saturday game, but the Colts had 9 days to prepare for that game. The Ravens only have 6. But the thing about the Eagles, without Carson Wentz, I don't really question their talent. I love their coaching, but I want to see how this defense is able to stay on the field now that they're going to be on the field more often. Because this defense is built to get after the passer. They have a lot of good pass rushers. I would like to see them play an extended period of time where they don't have these significant leads. Because Carson Wentz, you saw it throughout this season, would rack up 21 points in the first quarter, take significant leads, lead to the opposing offense throwing the football a lot, and that played right into what Jim Schwartz wanted them to do. right into what that strength of that defense is. Let's get after the passer, pin our ears back, and rush him. And we saw the Eagles defense struggle against a bad Giants offense, a very bad Giants offense. They yet to put up 30 points. I know it's been like 2 years. They've yet to put up 30 points, but they put up 29. If they got that 2-point conversion, they damn well could have. That would have changed the entire game if the Giants did get that 2-point conversion. And they could have kicked that field goal, would have went to OT, and we could have saw what would have happened. But Alshon Jeffrey, Nelson Aguilar, Trey Burton, Zach Ertz all got tutties in this game. Nick Foles, good job balling out in this game. And the Giants, we're just looking forward to next season. Sam Darnold, Josh Rosen, Baker Mayfield, whoever the Giants decide to go with. That's really what we're all looking at, but it's good to see them get up for a divisional game that was going to be a fight. And almost put up 30 points, like I said again, but not quite there. But man, the rest of this Week 15 slate was absolutely ridiculous. We went over the Thursday and the Saturday games on Saturday, well, I should say Sunday morning show, because that was like at 3 o'clock in the morning. But some of the other big games, there were a lot of games that determined some significant positions in the playoffs. We got the Bills taking down the Dolphins at home. So the Bills improved to 8-6 and put them in realistic contention to secure a wild card spot in the AFC, which is very exciting because we remember just a couple short weeks ago, they benched Tyrod Taylor for Nathan Peterman. Nathan Peterman goes out to Los Angeles and absolutely craps the bed, which was, I felt bad for him. I really did. I mean, that's a really tough spot. Like I've said before, you cannot put a rookie quarterback going on the road without Cordy Glenn, your starting left tackle, in a position to play against Joey Bosa and Melvin Ingram and that budding defense out there in Los Angeles. But those Chargers right now, sitting there at 7-7 after losing that game to the Chiefs, they might be out of this playoff picture, which is pretty good for all the AFC teams because you got Phillip Rivers and you got a really, really good defense. But they lost to the Chiefs. That was a bad loss. Arrowhead's such a hard place to play. But that might be a blessing in disguise for whoever makes it to the AFC Championship game, because I don't know if a lot of people really wanted to see that defense and those pass rushers. I'm sure a lot of offensive linemen definitely did not see it. But the Dolphins came out after that upset win, and Jay Cuddy'd. He threw 3 interceptions. A lot of them were just overthrows. He just looked very, very poor in this game. And this game was basically par for the course. LaShawn McCoy goes down looking like he's going to be injured for the year, comes back a couple plays later. He's been doing that since his days in Philly. Every time he gets injured, I don't take him seriously because he always just pops right back up and goes back in there. It's one of those things where it looks like he's going to have his leg amputated eventually, and then he's just back on the field. It's like, okay, you roll your eyes at it and be like, all right, this guy's either tough or I don't really know what the hell's going on, but that's shady McCoy right there in a nutshell. We saw the Ravens beat up on the Browns. Browns just cannot catch a break whatsoever. DeShone Kizer threw some really piss-poor interceptions in this game, and I'm not sure if Hugh Jackson's going to make it past Black Monday, to be honest. I mean, when you win one game in 2 seasons, do you deserve it? I mean, I know Jimmy Haslam, the owner, said he wants to stick it out with Hugh, but it's just been an absolute albatross there. They rushed the ball 5 times with Isaiah Crowell in this game for 72 yards. They couldn't really get anything going on the ground, and you're just trusting Kizer to throw the football way too much. We also saw Duke Johnson get in the end zone with a rushing touchdown in this game, but Kizer throwing the ball 37 times, not a recipe for success right now, and I want this team to get a victory so bad. I do not want them to join the 2008 Detroit Lions, but it's looking more and more like they may be. Next week, though, they play Chicago in Chicago. Kizer is going to start, and that's going to be, realistically, probably their last chance, that last-ditch effort to get that elusive victory, because it has not been a positive year whatsoever. You have a game at Pittsburgh the next week in Week 17. So that's not going to be an easy game. Even if they do rest some of their starters, that won't be an easy game. So that game against Chicago, Soldier Field, best of luck, Hugh Jackson. Or you may be joining those 2008 Lions. But it's also interesting because last year they won in Week 16 on that Saturday game against the Chargers on Christmas Eve. So maybe he's just really good at winning at Week 16. But we will see very soon, won't we? On to the Browns and the Vikings. The Vikings absolutely steamrolled the Bengals. I said the Browns before, I meant the Bengals. Marvin Lewis came out, said he's not going to return, a mutually parting of the ways. I've been saying for a couple seasons, I thought the Marvin Lewis reign had ended, and they just need a new voice there. Nothing against Marvin Lewis. It's good you went to the playoffs 7 times despite not winning one of those times, which is absolutely ridiculous. I mean, you let TJ Yates beat you in a playoff game. But he's going to part ways with the Bengals, and Bengals played like they didn't even have a head coach. Andy Dalton threw many disgusting passes. The Vikings did whatever they wanted. There was pick six. There was a lot of just grossness. The touchdown was a garbage touchdown by Giovanni Bernard late in the game. So the Vikings just steamrolled past them. And then there was the Jets and the Saints, where the Saints beat the Jets 31-19. And in this game, I thought was better than a lot of people expected. You have Bryce Petty coming down there. He went 1 of 2 for touchdown interception ratio. Threw the ball 39 times, 179 yards passing, but the Jets kept this game relatively close. I mean, let us not forget that the last touchdown in this game was a garbage time rushing touchdown, 50 yards by Mark Ingram, who I'm sure everybody who was playing against Mark Ingram in fantasy cringed because Mark Ingram really didn't do anything other than one short touchdown up until that point. So the Jets kept it relatively close, and that's what the Jets have been doing all year. Either winning close games or losing close games. Incredibly competitive. Everybody wrote them off early. Now they're sitting there at 5-9. They're much more respectable than a lot of people thought. If they had Josh McCown, this game could have been really, really interesting. But they had Bryce Petty, so they were handcuffed somewhat. No offense to Bryce. Todd Bowles has earned his right to come back as the head football coach of this team. And he will be coming back as the head football coach of this team when a lot of people thought he was just going to be a scapegoat coach and he was going to be gone. So good for Todd Bowles to earn that right, and hopefully they improve. Robbie Anderson in this game had 5 catches for 40 yards, and Bryce Petty did what we all thought he was going to do. Just hyper-target Robbie Anderson. Targeted him 12 times. That was more than what Drew Brees targeted Michael Thomas, who was basically, I don't want to say gypped out of 2 touchdowns, but he came so close to getting 2 touchdowns. So if you had him on your fantasy team, you were more than likely very happy with the 1 touchdown, 93 yards he gave you, but still a little bit upset because it wasn't what it could have been, what it was very close to being. And Brandon Coleman from Rutgers fumbled the ball twice in this game, lost both those fumbles. Opportunistic defense by the Jets, and not a good look for one of the local products in Brandon Coleman. We had the Redskins just squeak out past the Arizona Cardinals, where Blaine Gabbert got beat up in this game. The Redskins defense was all over him for the majority of the game. He was sacked 5 times, threw an interception, and it was just one of those things where teams that travel, and I say this a lot, teams that travel east for 1 o'clock starts, those West Coast teams, it just usually doesn't bode well for them, and Cardinals are probably the prime example of that. We've seen it throughout the Carson Palmer years there. And they traveled east, and it just did not work out whatsoever for them. But the Skins are kind of a really crappy team as well. Kirk Cousins threw the 2 touchdowns. They couldn't really get anything going on the ground, and it was just one of those things where it was field goal kind of game, where I think Phil Dawson had all their points were through field goals. So if you start a Phil Dawson in fantasy, more than likely a happy individual. Moving on, though, Panthers and Packers. Now, this was an important game because the Packers are basically effectively eliminated now from playoff contention, and it was one of the games where we were looking forward to this because it had a lot of playoff implications. And I think the coolest thing from this game, honestly, was Cam Newton talking to Clay Matthews. And if you haven't seen this, I would encourage you to go to Twitter and look it up. They're on the goal line, the Carolina Panthers, and Cam Newton's shouting out his indications and his kind of audibles to his players so they all know on offense what's going on. Well, Clay Matthews picked up on it. And Clay Matthews says, that's a wheel route. That's a wheel route. So Cam Newton acknowledged it mid-play. Play clock's counting down and everything. He said, oh, you study. Oh, you do your homework, don't you? And you hear Clay Matthews go, oh, yeah. And they're kind of going back and forth. And then Cam Newton just slips in, all right, well, watch this. And then he gives him the watch this, says hike, instead of the wheel route from McCaffrey. McCaffrey runs the Texas route, which is an angle route, goes out in the flats, breaks it up to the middle. It's great for beating man coverage. Granted, Matthews was on the other side of the play, but it scores a touchdown. It's just one of those perfect moments and those perfect things where it was the back and forth between an offensive player and a defensive player, and Cam Newton kind of comes out looking like the smart guy in this situation. But man, did he target Christian McCaffrey in this game quite a bit. McCaffrey had 6 catches for 73 yards, also had 12 carries for 63 yards. He had a really good game, and Cam Newton balled out. He might have balled his way into MVP conversation with the injuries to Antonio Brown, the injuries to Carson Wentz, Russell Wilson struggling the last 2 games. Cam Newton, I think, is an outside shot. If he does really well in these next 2 games, if the Carolina Panthers end up taking that division, which isn't out of the realm of possibility, Cam Newton could be looking at his second MVP. Now, is that a stretch? I don't think it's a stretch. I don't think it's on a lot of people's radars right now, but you got to look at the Panthers' schedule. They have Tampa Bay, who will be coming off of a short week, and then they got to go to Atlanta, which could be a game for the division depending on what happens with the Saints. I think the Saints will win that division, but that last game could be incredibly important. If he balls out in both those games, with all the injuries that have been happening and people not wanting to give that award to Tom Brady, Cam Newton might earn that award despite struggling in the beginning of this season. Aaron Rodgers in his debut from injury threw 3 interceptions and 3 touchdowns. Something you never see Aaron Rodgers do is throw interceptions, and he did in this game. He threw for 290 yards, and the Packers had a realistic chance to win this game, and I don't think that should be overlooked, and I was very disappointed when it didn't come to fruition because they scored a late touchdown, and then they recover the onside kick. McCaffrey did not secure the onside kick. It squeaked out, and the Packers recovered it. So they had plenty of time to drive down the field and score a touchdown. But on a little slant route, Rodgers hits Geronimo Allison. Geronimo Allison, I thought this could have been ruled not a catch, but upon further review, it was probably the right call. He gets hit, he fumbles the ball, Carolina recovers, and it was a very unceremonious end to what could have been another Aaron Rodgers amazing comeback. And now that basically takes Aaron Rodgers out of the playoffs, so I guarantee every NFC team is probably breathing a huge sigh of relief. But that was one of the better games on the early slate to pay attention to. I was watching the majority of the Giants games, but I kept trying to flip and see what was going on with the Panthers and Packers and some of those other key pivotal matchups. We saw the Jaguars absolutely destroy the Texans at home. DeAndre Hopkins did get a touchdown against Jalen Ramsey. I just wanted to note that because DeAndre Hopkins has basically scored a touchdown against every solid cornerback in the league. But the Jacksonville Jaguars are real, guys. Blake Bortles is playing very well, and I know Houston has not been a good team. Bortles, 21 of 29 for 3 touchdowns, 326 yards. He's playing really well. We saw Tommy Bohannon get his first 2 touchdowns of his career. It's a local guy because he used to be with the Jets. This game was just an odd game. Mickens scores 2 touchdowns. Cole scores a touchdown. Marcus Lee gets hurt in the very beginning of this game. DeAndre Hopkins sees 13 targets, catches 4 of them for 80 yards and a touchdown. 45 points from the Jacksonville Jaguars. Who would have thought that a year ago? And the Texans will fade into oblivion. They sit there at 4-10 right now, and we all just wonder what it could have been if Deshaun Watson didn't get hurt at practice, because that division could have been incredibly exciting. We saw Tennessee end up losing this week to Jimmy Garoppolo and the San Francisco 49ers. Robbie Gould kicked. I think he's still kicking field goals right now. I swear to God now that Jimmy Garoppolo is leading this team. He had 1 touchdown and 381 yards passing in that game. They are always in the red zone. It's looking like the 49ers got away with a steal from the New England Patriots. I know he's going to be a free agent this year, but you know the 49ers will lock him up. But he's looking very competent. And I know the Titans aren't exactly a good team. Yes, they're 8-6 right now. Yes, they're in the playoff contention and all that kind of stuff. But I've been saying it for a couple of weeks. They're the worst 8-5 team, now 8-6 team you will ever see. And they lose to the 49ers off of a Robbie Gould kick. But the rapport that Goodwin and Garoppolo have is very real. I thought that was an incredibly exciting game to witness and watch. We also saw Delaney Walker drop a touchdown and then come back and catch a touchdown in that game. It was a hashtag rivalry game for Mr. Walker. And then we saw what I want to say is a changing of the guard for the NFC West. Now, this is a changing of the guard because I think the Seattle era is somewhat over right now. The Seattle era of Pete Carroll, of that vaunted defense, who are now overpaid. Well, I don't want to say overpaid, but who are now paid and who are now older, I think it's over. I think a big reason why Seattle was dominating and they were basically a guaranteed playoff berth was because every other team in their division other than the Cardinals were inept. You had a Jeff Fisher-led Rams team. I'm sure Seattle and Arizona were upset when they heard Jeff Fisher was fired. Not because they like him, but now you can bring in somebody who knows what he's doing. And they did with Sean McVay. And you got Kyle Shanahan and Jimmy Garoppolo for the 49ers. And what the Rams did in Seattle with the quote-unquote 12th man, steal that from the Aggies, it was embarrassing. They embarrassed Seattle in their vaunted home field. Todd Gurley, 21 carries for 152 yards. Seattle couldn't touch him. They couldn't tackle him. They couldn't do anything against Todd Gurley. He had 3 touchdowns in that game, ran all over them. 3 receptions for 28 yards and another touchdown, totaling 4 tutties in that game. Jared Goff didn't even have to do anything because all they had to do was give it to Gurley and he was going to score. And Seattle couldn't do anything on offense. Russell Wilson was sacked 7 times. Fumbled the ball twice. Tanner McAvoy, local kid from Jersey, also fumbled. Aaron Donald had 3 sacks in this game. He was an absolute beast. He had 10 quarterback pressures. He just was all over Russ all day. And like I said, I think this is a changing of the guard kind of situation where Seattle has to realize we have a lot of deficiencies on this team. We have a lot of big contracts and some injured players. You have Earl Thomas coming out after the game saying that Bobby Wagner shouldn't have played. It seems like the team is somewhat entitled. The team in general. They're entitled. They have flaws. They have a great quarterback, yes, but they don't have an offensive line. And they were just exposed by Sean McVay and the Rams. And that was basically the Rams going up to Seattle and saying, this is our division now. Get lost. Seattle had a chance on their home field to be number 1 in the division, and they got embarrassed. Absolutely embarrassed. That says something right there. I know they're beat up. I know they're injured. But they'll be older, another year older next year. They do not have a lot of cap space. The Rams are young, have a great, innovative head coach, and have an absolute incredible amount of cap space. That's a scary thing for Seattle Seahawks fans. Moving on, though, to the 2 games that I really wanted to touch on. Onto the Patriots and Steelers at Heinz Field. This game had some rain coming down. It was a great, gritty December kind of football game between 2 potential AFC champions right here. Both of these teams have legitimate shots, but New England significantly increased their chances by securing this victory 27-24 in such a controversial fashion. I mean, how many times can New England be on the end of a controversial call? We saw it with Austin Seferian-Jenkins and the Jets earlier this year with what we're going to talk about here shortly in the Oakland game, fumbling out of the back of the end zone. And now this. So let me just paint the picture first before we dive in to the call. This was a gritty sort of game where we saw a lot of injuries. We saw Antonio Brown get injured in this game, and I'd be surprised if we see him at all in the playoffs. I mean, I know they said that he could be out there in the playoffs, but I'd be surprised with a calf injury. Rex Burkhead avoided structural damage, but he also hurt his knee, and he left this game as well. We saw Ryan Shazier in the stands, which was very, very motivating for the Steelers, and it was really, really good to see the smile on his face and everything because we all know about the devastating injury that he had. But this was a back-and-forth game, very, very contended. We had the Pittsburgh Steelers up 24-19, punting the ball after being shut out 3 plays. There's about 2 minutes left in the fourth quarter. Tommy Terrific, Tom Brady, gets the ball. What does he do? He's like, who's our best player? Rob Gronkowski. So we're going to throw the ball at Rob Gronkowski. Now let's go back to the AFC Championship game last year. Tom Brady surgically dissected Keith Butler's defense, that zone defense that Pittsburgh traditionally runs. So Pittsburgh made a point to get a lot of good man corners and kind of get that team up to be able to cover in man coverage, which is usually a much tighter coverage, forces Tom Brady to really force the ball in there. Because it's man coverage, not zone coverage, where you could just take advantage of soft spots. But playing man coverage on Rob Gronkowski is very, very hard because he is faster than linebackers and he is much bigger than linebackers. And if you try to put a safety on him, he is incredibly bigger than you. So he's a mismatch nightmare. And Brady knows that. So he knows that Pittsburgh's going to be out there in man coverage. And Pittsburgh didn't figure out a way to stop Gronk, especially on this 5-play, 77-yard drive where Brady goes out, incomplete pass to Gronk, then a deep pass down the middle for 26 yards, which led to the 2-minute warning, and then another deep pass down the middle right up the seam for another 26 yards, and then another deep pass to the right for 17 yards where he absolutely torched Sean Davis and Mike Mitchell and their safeties. And Mike Tomlin and Pittsburgh just didn't adjust to that huge threat of Gronk, and it made them pay. And it ended up leading to a touchdown by Dion Lewis, just a 7-yard touchdown rush with a minute left in the game, and then Rob Gronkowski gets the 2-point conversion to go up 27-24. So you're thinking, wow, you have about a minute left in this game. Hopefully Ben Roethlisberger can drive down the field, get this team into field goal range, tie it up, and then we'll go to overtime. Solid plan. Let's do it. But Ben Roethlisberger with a short little pass to Juju Smith-Schuster. Juju takes it up the sidelines for 69 yards and automatically puts them in field goal range. They're down there at the 10-yard line. Roethlisberger finds Jesse James over the middle of the field for a touchdown, or what we think is a touchdown. Now, upon further review, Romo and Nance, I thought they did an excellent job in this game. They're talking about, yeah, he's definitely in, the ball crosses the plane, yada, yada. But then Romo sees that ball kind of comes loose when he hits the ground. And the ground assists him, quote unquote, in the catch. Now, I've seen a ton of people come out and say, oh, this is just the Patriots and the refs, they're in cahoots with each other. That is a ridiculous notion, okay? The Steelers are just as much of a popular team as the Patriots. It's not an evil empire thing. It's just the NFL has a really, really ridiculous rule, and it's juxtaposed with instant replay makes it kind of even more ridiculous to enforce because it takes away the element of common sense. And that's what this rule does. Technology is sort of the issue here because before, and by anybody who watches the game, you say that is a catch. He catches the ball, he goes across the plane, and then he hits the ground. And that kind of makes it come loose a little bit. You see that in instant replay. You don't see that by the naked eye. You don't use your common sense, but because we have instant replay, we see the little nuances of this play that technically make it not a catch. And because the rule is so that if you make a quote-unquote catch and you don't secure it through the ground, then it's technically not a catch. So it's more of a rule thing than we need the Patriots to win, obviously. But a big issue is this instant replay that we have. It's a gift and a curse at the same time. Because now you see the little things. And yes, it does come loose. So by the letter of the law, it's the correct call. It's just you need to find a way to alter that call. To kind of make it more of a human element type of thing. Because common sense tells you that is a catch. Common sense easily tells us that is a catch. But when you go to the replay and you see that the ground quote unquote assists in the catch and he doesn't possess the ball throughout the entirety of the catch, then that has to be the rule. And we saw this with Austin Seferian-Jenkins. Not to bring him up again. I feel like he's been at the bad end of both of these terrible incidences when it comes to officiating from last night. But Austin Seferian-Jenkins, it looked like a catch, but it slightly bobbled just a little bit. And technically, that's not a catch. But this one, because he was going to the ground assists him in the catch, even though it looked like he was making a quote-unquote football move. Because the way the law and the call is written in the rule books makes it not a catch. And it's the same thing with Dez Bryant. And I think it's stupid. I think it needs to be changed. It's somewhat ridiculous. We need this element of common sense to be implemented in these rulings. But because the law is what it is, Dez's catch and James's catch both are not catches. So Jesse James, who has a notorious name of a villain, somebody who used to rob banks, got robbed on that one. But because of the rule book and the lack of common sense, not because the officials want the Patriots to win. And that game in and of itself, though, before I go into the Oakland-Dallas game, is very, very wild, because if Pittsburgh wins that game, they go to 12-3. The Patriots go to 10-4, and they secure home field advantage. And basically that berth in the AFC Championship game with the Patriots would be in Heinz Field. The Patriots would have fallen behind the Jacksonville Jaguars. And Jacksonville would have been the one who could have clinched a bye, which is crazy to think about. That one ruling of that not being a catch changed the entire seedings of the AFC playoff picture. New England would have dropped down to the third seed. Jacksonville would have moved up to the second seed. Now, there's still some football to be played, but it could have played out that way. All because of one little bobble of the football and what all of us think was a catch. But because the law is the law, that's what happens. And after that horrid play, it was a big miscommunication between Ben Roethlisberger and Mike Tomlin and that coaching staff, more than likely Todd Haley. Because Ben gets up, he throws the ball to Darius Hayward-Bay. There's about 28 seconds left on the clock. Bay catches it for a short, modest gain. And Ben wanted to clock the ball so he could think about what to do next. But according to Ben, the sideline was telling him not to clock it. So he ran a play with the personnel and the people in there on the offense thinking they were going to clock the ball. And it was just a messy play. Eli Rogers ran a little quick slant that was easily covered. And Eric Rowe tips the pass, and Daron Harmon intercepts it. And that's the way that game ended. A wild ending, a wild ruling, and New England comes out on top. I swear. It is wild to think how many times New England can come out in the winner in these situations. They are well coached. I mean, I'll give them that. But luck comes into it sometimes, and I mean, Jesse James doesn't, quote-unquote, have the ground system in the catch. Then they more than likely lose this game, drop to the third seed, but now the AFC playoffs will run through New England, and we might see them in the Super Bowl once again. Absolutely crazy. And then Sunday night's game said, yo, Patriots-Steelers game, you guys had a really controversial call? Well, hold my beer, because this one had a few controversial calls that led to another enemy of a lot of fans of football to win the game, the Dallas Cowboys, which keeps the Cowboys' playoff hopes alive at 8-6, and Oakland's 6-8 record effectively eliminated from playoff contention. But Dak Prescott came out in this game, threw 2 interceptions, did not look all that great, had 212 yards, did get a rushing tutty as well in this game. Alfred Morris, 61 yards on the ground. Rod Smith had 13 yards on the ground, but he was the one who vultured Morris's touchdown, of course. Derek Carr looked effective in this game after looking absolutely terrible last week against the Chiefs. Only threw for 171 yards, but did have 2 touchdowns. But the 2 plays that we're going to dive into before I just sit here and yaddle, I don't even know if that's a word, go on about stats, is the play that kept the Dallas Cowboys season alive, essentially, was judged by Gene Steratore by an index card. Now, I brought this up earlier, and if you weren't paying attention or didn't really know what happened, the Dallas Cowboys, on 4th down, go for it. And the ball literally could not get any closer to the chain. So they bring it out for a measurement, customary things. They measure it. The chains and the ball are basically right next to each other. So Gene Steratore, who I was listening to Mr. Dean Blandino earlier, is sort of, according to Mr. Blandino, is sort of a showman a little bit. And he had a smile on his face the whole time. It seemed like Chris Collinsworth and Al Michaels really enjoyed the fact that he was really enjoying himself because he seems to be a showman in that aspect. And I think by him pulling out this index card that was folded and putting it in between the football, that was basically him just kind of being a showman, seeing how close it really was. That is not protocol of the NFL by any stretch of the imagination, but it was very hilarious because you think about all of this instant replay, all of these things that the NFL has at its disposal. and they judged if that was a first down by putting a folded index card in between the ball and the marker. And since it had a clear path through, or since it was stopped by the ball, because it was folded, a lot of people are saying, it's a first down Dallas. So Dallas gets the first down by literally an index card. And it was kind of a wild thing. Like, that can't be the way that we are judging if it's a first down or not a first down. But it was the way when it came to this instance, which is absolutely crazy when you think about it. But again, I think it was more a product of Gene Steratore being a showman and just being like, all right, how close is this? It wasn't actual protocol. It's not like, hey, pull up a folded index card and put it in between, and that's how we're going to see if this is a first down. But man, was that the closest call you could ever have. But that wasn't even the worst call of the game. Now, I can't say worst call because by the letter of the rule, this is also in the rule book. Derek Carr is leading his team down the field, down by a field goal, just like Big Ben. And it's late in the fourth quarter. So what are we going to do? What are we going to do as the Oakland Raiders? We could just settle, go for a field goal, and go for overtime, or we can go for it all. And that's what Derek Carr tried to do. An 8-play, 88-yard drive with less than a minute and a half left in this game. Carr organizes a very, very dink and dunk kind of drive. Got a very, very lucky, I don't want to say lucky, but very, very, I would say it was a very good call, to be honest. But the fact that Jordan Lewis was all over Michael Crabtree was a big mistake on Jordan Lewis's part. It was more of a product of him being a rookie, making a bad mistake. And he grabs Crabtree and is all over him, all alone in man coverage downfield, led to a defensive pass interference of 55 yards. So Carr is in position now. So on a 3rd and 3, Derek Carr scrambles to the right, and he sees the pylon. He's about 7 to 8 yards away. So he starts running towards the pylon, and he dives, and about the 2-yard line, while still in bounds, the ball slips out of his hands, goes out of the back of the end zone, which is ruled a fumble out of the back of the end zone. And when that happens, it's ruled a touchback for the other team. So you lose possession of the ball, and the other team gains possession. Now, that is a harsh rule, and again, we saw that with Austin Seferian-Jenkins, like I mentioned before. I mean, I've been listening to a lot of people today. I think the rule should be you possibly get the ball back at the 20-yard line or something like that. But I honestly feel like that's like someone jaywalking and them getting arrested on the spot for doing it. You're fumbling, reaching for the pylon. It slips out of your hand before you cross the pylon. And if it goes out of the back of the end zone or the side of the end zone, then it's your opponent's ball. I don't know. I feel like that's very rough, and that's what happened to Oakland, and that really ended their playoff hopes. 2 calls that are very unfortunate. One being an index card, the other being a fumble out of the back of the end zone. I think that play really needs to be revised, the fumble out of the back of the end zone. I mean, you could change rules like this. We've seen this before. I mean, at one point, an incomplete pass from your opponent's end zone used to be a turnover. So let's really look at some of these rules, especially this one, fumbling out of the back of the end zone. I say if you fumble out of the back of the end zone, you take the ball at the 20 or the 25, and you have to start over again. So if you were on the 1-yard line or 2-yard line and you ended up doing that, you get pushed back. And you come up with rules either making that a first down or you have to resume whatever down it was going to be. But just giving the ball up, a touchback, I don't know. I feel like that's a little strict. But I just wanted to jump on here and go on about those kind of things. Anyways, this is it for football and a brief little episode about Week 15, a wild Week 15 it was. I hope you guys have a lovely, lovely night. Ta-ta now.